Hi, I'm Antonia. This is Universally Me. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Antonia Carlotta and check out my Patreon. Especially check out my Patreon now, as I have started a new series that I'm calling my Universally Minis, which are mini podcasts with extra content that didn't make this video, as well as news coming out of Universal, out of the horror community, any classic film news, remakes, stuff like that. I thought my first Universally Mini was going to be about 5 minutes, and it's looking like it's closer to 15, so it's pretty legit, it's real stuff. Go check it out now. Also, for any of you that were fans of the early 2000s show Strange Days at Blake Halsey High, the show is getting a revival. It is coming back. First episodes have been released online and I am in them. And I'm so excited. My character's name is Iris. I am the lead of the first 3 episodes, so that's like out of this world amazing. So go watch those too. I've got them linked below. About 2 years ago, which is weird to say because it feels like yesterday, but about 2 years ago, I made a video called How My Family Lost Universal Studios. And I think the title is pretty self-explanatory. For those of you who are new here, my great uncle Carl Laemmle started Universal in 1912, and his son Junior took control of the studio at just 21 years old. And from there, a ton of my aunts and uncles, grandparents, cousins, they all worked at Universal Studios over the years as writers, directors, producers, actors, dancers, and more. After 1936, my family lost the studio. And their last big movie, the movie that lost them the studio, was Showboats. So in this video, we will get into the good, the bad, and the ugly of this movie, and we'll get into some of my family stuff too. So let's get to it. Showboat was a 1936 musical written by Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein, based on the 1926 novel by Edna Ferber. The film takes place from the 1880s to the 1920s, following Magnolia Hawkes on her family's showboat, where she takes over as leading lady when another actress, Julie, and her husband are forced to leave when it's found out that Julie is part black and her husband is white. Showboat has a star-studded cast with Irene Dunne, Paul Robeson, Allan Jones, Helen Morgan, Charles Winninger, and Hattie McDaniel. The original Broadway show premiered December 27th, 1927 at the Ziegfeld Theater, and Morgan, Winninger, and White all played their roles in the original Broadway cast. Dunne, Robeson, Jones, and McDaniel had played their roles before too on the stage in the early 1930s. The 1936 Showboat is not the first film version of Showboat. Universal had already made it as a silent film in 1929, but my Uncle Carl was not too happy with that film. In 1929, the film industry was still transitioning from silent film to sound. So as Universal's wrapping up production on Showboat, they suddenly realized, wait, what if audiences are expecting our musical to have sound? So they decided to go back and do some reshoots. They added about 30 minutes of music and dialogue. But as they're getting ready to premiere that, the Broadway version of Showboat really blows up. So Universal has a second panic. What if audiences are expecting the same music as in the Broadway show, and that's not what we have here? So they went back again and they added a prologue featuring actors from the Broadway show performing the Broadway music. And then when they released Showboat, some theaters got the fully silent version, some got the version with these reshoots and the prologue. And all of this to say it was kind of a mishmash. It wasn't super cohesive. And that's why just a few years later, Universal was ready to remake Showboat again. I couldn't believe the first time when I found out who directed this film, but it was none other than James Whale, the very same James Whale who directed Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein and The Invisible Man. I feel like this is another reminder of just how talented he was at his craft, but I will say that not everybody felt that way when he was hired. I've specifically heard that Irene Dunne and Allan Jones thought that James Whale was the wrong pick. He was not American, and he was making a very American film, and he was really only known for war movies and horror movies before this. So I kind of get their hesitation. I think James Whale got things off on the wrong foot too by coming on a little too strong on one of his first days. Essentially, he made an announcement to the actors who had been performing in these roles for years at this point, and told them to forget everything that they thought they knew so that he could tell them what he wanted. And it went over about as well as you'd expect. But James Whale was determined to get past that shaky start and determined to prove his artistic talent beyond the horror films that everyone was associating him with. And it really might have been first day jitters, because once filming was underway, he had no trouble collaborating with the actors, and once you see the movie, I think it's pretty obvious that he was the right pick to direct. James Whale didn't see Showboat as just a play being recorded. He really had a cinematic masterpiece in mind. And Universal spent almost $1.2 million bringing his vision to life. That wasn't the original budget, but we'll get into that part later. He had beautifully constructed, lavish sets where he built old towns and steamboats and a river. There were more than 3,000 actors, singers, dancers, and musicians in the production. Pre-production took about a year, and filming wrapped in about 3 months. James Whale and Paul Robeson got along particularly well during filming and had a great respect for each other. Paul Robeson singing Old Man River is consistently cited as a standout in the film, and it's really considered one of the greatest musical movie moments of all time. If you haven't seen it before, I recommend you go look it up on YouTube, like right after this. For 1936, the film managed to approach certain aspects of race in a pretty progressive and nuanced way. It addressed racial disparities, it got special permission from the Hays Code to include a storyline with an interracial marriage, and it hired Black actors to play prominent roles, which I know is doing the least, but is still a lot more than a lot of other films were doing back then. On the other hand, this film is not without its tropes and stereotypes, and even includes a number with Irene Dunne in blackface, which is uncomfortable to watch, and then double uncomfortable to see all of the great press that Irene Dunne got over that scene specifically. When Showboat was released on May 14th, 1936, it got rave reviews. But I feel like this is a good time to pivot to the behind the scenes. Like what was going on with my family at Universal and why this movie is the reason they lost it. When Junior Lemley took control of Universal Studios at 21 years old, he transitioned the studio from churning out hundreds of low-budget films a year to instead making a few high-budget, high-quality films a year. And this meant high risk, high reward. If a film did well, that was fantastic. But if a film flopped, it was a much bigger loss. Junior had great vision and a great mind for the business. After all, it was because of his monster movies that Universal was one of the only studios not to record a loss during the Great Depression. Junior really believed in his movies, and with a couple big ones in the pipeline, he convinced his dad to take out a $750,000 loan with a Wall Street firm called Standard Capital. They had 90 days to pay it back, or Standard Capital had the option to buy Universal. Unfortunately, their other two films, Magnificent Obsession and Sutter's Gold, were also going over time and over budget. They needed to finish Showboat and get it in theaters in order to save Universal, but instead, they went another 2 weeks over and spent another $400,000. 90 days was up, and Standard Capital made good on their terms. They paid Carl out and he stepped down as president, and Junior retired as well. The killer here is that when Showboat was finally released, it was a wild success. Audiences loved it, critics loved it, and it more than made its money back. The New York Times called it one of the finest musical movies it had ever seen, and Variety called it a smash hit and said it was a cinch for big grosses for theaters. If only all of that were enough to hand the studio back to my family. In the 1940s, MGM bought the rights to Showboat and withdrew the 1936 version from circulation so people wouldn't be too attached to the old one when they wanted to remake it. Unfortunately, plans fell through and MGM's version of Showboat wouldn't be released until 1951. In the 1980s, it was finally seen again on TV, and a restored version of the film was released in 2014. Despite the fact that this movie meant the end for my family at Universal, there's no denying that it's a great movie and it left a pretty great legacy. So if you haven't watched it yet, give it a watch tonight. And don't forget to check out my Patreon mini podcast, my Universally Mini. I had so much extra stuff to share about this movie specifically that I made a whole podcast out of it, and it's honestly pretty awesome. It's also just a great way to support my work. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram if you're not already. Check me out in the Blake Halsey High reboot, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.